Good morning. Welcome to The Point. Recently on Mackinac Island, I had the opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with Senator Debbie Stabenow. We talked about a wide range of subjects, including one that she says is of great economic interest to all of North America. Senator, let's talk about something as we look out over this beautiful, serene straits, how proud we are in Michigan of this resource.
Yes.
But how fragile it can be. You and others, in a bipartisan effort, I might point out, have been working to get money put back into the budget to make sure that these Great Lakes are protected. Talk to me about that.
Yes. Well, 95% of all of the fresh water in the United States surrounds Michigan. It's incredible. We're 20% of the world's fresh water, and so that is a very special responsibility for all of us. So when the president tried to zero out all the money used to protect the Great Lakes and the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, we came together on a bipartisan basis, put back every penny. The administration's wanting to take out 90% of the money for this next year. But what's interesting is in the water resources bill that came out of the Senate committee, I was able to work with the chairman in a bipartisan way, not only to authorize current funding, but to increase it. Over the next 3 years, we'll go from $300 million to $390 million. And so clearly, the Senate is sending a message on a bipartisan basis. We protect this water because it's an incredible natural resource. And really for us in Michigan, it's in our DNA. So that piece, we also have language that will strengthen our ability to protect against Asian carp. We also have dollars in that resources bill to deal with PFAS, which is incredibly important. We're seeing this now in West Michigan in our water systems. And very importantly as well, the Sioux locks will be authorized for construction. We're waiting for the Army Corps on the number of what this will cost. We hope to have it within 30 days. Plug the number into the bill, and we'll be ready to move ahead now on engineering and then eventually construction.
I want to talk about each of those individually because I find them to be important on a number of different levels, but the first thing that pops into my mind is $300 million. And I want to say this carefully because I appreciate that every dollar that is allocated is tax dollars and it is important, and $300 million sounds like a lot if you're talking to you or me, but in the federal budget, the scope of the federal budget, $300 million is a rounding error.
It is. It's not a large amount of money, and so I can't believe that we have to fight so hard every year to be able to get the money protected in the budget. It's a small amount in terms of investment for a huge economic engine, not only for Michigan, but for the entire country. And in fact, 1 out of 5 jobs in Michigan is connected to the water. So that's a very big deal. So the $300 million, being able to inch that up to $390 million. Certainly that's a lot of money in the context of the federal budget. However, it's very small and it's targeted and it's a great investment.
It's been somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 or more years. I was at an event with you and other members of Congress talking about invasive species. And here we are all those years later still fighting yet another invasive species, the Asian carp. You mentioned that in this too. And there is a situation where you were waiting for the Army Corps of Engineers for quite a while to come up with some kind of recommendation. You satisfied they've gotten along to where they need to be?
This is very frustrating, and as you know, invasive species, whether it's sea lamprey or whether it's zebra mussels, which we've had to tackle, or these big, huge fish that could really destroy the other fish in the ecosystem, it's a continual battle for us. The Army Corps was supposed to have a study with cost estimates on what we need to be doing aggressively to stop this. We're supposed to have it done and released by now. And unfortunately, the vice president, who is very close to the shippers in Indiana and coming up the Mississippi, Illinois rivers, blocked it from being released so that we could move forward. So in the water resources bill, we have a requirement that they're going to have to release that study, because even though nothing is done in the recommendations that would block shippers from moving up the river, we've had a terrible time with them not wanting to do anything. For instance, there is a maneuver that shippers can do when they go through the lock and dams where they zigzag, where it will be more likely that any small fish attached to them would not be able to move through the locks. Just something as simple as that, we've had resistance from shippers to do. And so we've had to push and push and push to be able to get this recommendation released, and this bill now in the Senate would require them to do that.
Talk about PFAS, that is a subject that we have covered extensively on 24 Hour News 8, and the biggest concern for a lot of people is what we don't know.
Yes.
We don't know exactly what it does. We don't know exactly where it might be. We don't know exactly how it travels, how long it lasts, all of those things. What we do know is it's probably in every state in the union, at least in 38 states we know already. So this is a federal issue.
It's a big issue. This is a very big issue. This is a grouping of chemicals used in fire retardants and foams that have been used. It's also something that's been used as water repellents in boots, and a whole range of things. And so we know that it lasts a long time. That's what we know. There's also been a health study that unfortunately, because it actually shows health problems, the EPA is now blocking it from being released, which is very concerning to me because people have a right to know. We have been able to put funding in Department of Defense to look at health impacts and also add dollars for cleanup on our military sites. We have former Air Force bases and Camp Grayling up north. Basically every single military base use this kind of firefighting chemicals, and so it's a major issue for federal installations as well as private water systems.
When you think about something like this, they call it emerging contaminants. And one of the people I talked about who is kind of involved in this process on the ground said, yes, PFAS, but what else? Over the course of the years, when you and I were kids, we handled a lot of different chemicals, even engine oil, in different ways. And now all those years later, we may start seeing some of this emergence of chemicals that we might not even use today, PFAS, that can still be a concern. That could be a billions and billions of dollar problem.
This is a real challenge for us, and in a state that makes things. I mean, we've been the economic engine for manufacturing. We have been the ones developing the chemicals, the technologies, doing all of these things that have it really created a generation in the middle class in our country, all of which is good, but we are now seeing long-term impacts that in each of these areas. Now, we're going to have to figure that out. We have to be honest about those health impacts. I also think innovation can help us going forward. We have some bioprocesses now where we can use corn oil or soy oil or other kinds of efforts that are safer, both for people and for the environment, that we're going to have to transition to. But this is a real challenge. No one at the time was trying to do something that was unsafe, and yet here we are. And so it's a major health issue.
Now, here is an issue that perplexes me, and I must admit that I knew nothing about it until perhaps 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago. Senator Peters went to the Sioux Locks and started talking about a problem with the locks. I've been fascinated by them, but I'd never been there. So I went to visit them the following summer. And then just last year, you and a bipartisan group of folks just down the big porch here said, this isn't just a problem for Michigan. It's not just a problem for Midwestern or northern states. It's North America and the economy beyond. Explain to me, first of all, the importance of the locks, and then let's talk a little bit about the problem, because when that was explained, that became a little frightening.
Well, first of all, the locks were built in World War II, and it was a national security issue. It was about bringing materials, raw materials for manufacturing, into not only the Great Lakes and into Michigan, but then they come down the waterways and they go on rail and they are trucked in other places all around the country. So it's a major artery for us in terms of transportation. And so World War II was a while ago, and we still have the same locks. And so this is a major concern. What would happen if the largest lock, there's only one lock that handles 70% of the traffic coming through.
That's
the barges
the
coming through. It's the pole lock. We have 2 smaller ones that have had trouble, but our goal, our plan, is to take the 2 small ones and make a second large lock so that we have redundancy if one is shut down. Now, originally, even the Army Corps of Engineers did an economic study and didn't look at all the impacts. So when they presented it to us, we said, no, you're not understanding what's really going on here. They went back and looked again, and that's what, right now, what they're in the process of doing is giving us the real numbers. They've shown that, in fact, we're talking about, within a matter of weeks, shutting down the entire American economy. And in the water resources bill, what's significant is once they give us what it will cost to replace it, we're going to be able to finally move forward to add an additional lock.
You don't have the hard numbers, but I know you must have talked to them. Are we talking about tens of billions of dollars?
No, actually, we're talking around $1 billion, I think, is what we're talking about. So,
and again, a lot of money to you and I, but if it's a federal issue.
Right. As a federal issue for the whole country, given the hundreds of billions of dollars that are impacted by this, this is something that is achievable and needs to get done.
There's more to talk about with Senator Stabenow, including an election coming up. That's next. To the Point. Welcome back to the Point. U.S. Senator Debbie Stabenow talked about a number of issues that she's working on currently in the United States Senate. We also talked about an upcoming election. A few years ago, when the Farm Bill was reauthorized, there were some pretty big changes. Mm-hmm. And you and your ranking member went around coming here to Michigan and elsewhere and talked about why those changes were important, how they strengthened the agricultural stability to protect the environment and do some other things to give specialty crops access to insurance that had not been available to them. It's time to reauthorize again. What are you looking to do this time around?
Well, 5 years ago, we did a major reform, and we basically said we're not going to pay people just based on whatever they grow. They're not going to get, farmers aren't going to get a check no matter what. We want to support them when there's a downtime, prices go down, weather problems. So it should be about risk, and taxpayers should be there because we have a stake in the food system, but you shouldn't just get a government check. So we changed it to insurance. We added fruits and vegetables, which are important, as well as small farming operations. This time around, we're talking about maintaining those things, really getting feedback on what worked and didn't work, and so making changes that just cut down on bureaucracy, make things work better. We added some very important new conservation programs for water and land that have a big impact on Michigan, and we found that a little bit too much bureaucracy, decisions haven't been able to be made as fast as we'd like, so we want to change that. But this is more about maintaining the direction of reform and making it work better.
And in doing this, you met some benchmarks I don't think any other committee met when it came to reduction in cost. Now, I know that's not necessarily the game plan this time, but when you look at the makeup of your committee and the ideology that's out there, you're dealing with a lot of folks that came from some states that voted very heavily for Donald Trump, obviously, in some of those agriculture states. Do you still have the ability to get that bipartisan agreement?
We do have the ability to get a bipartisan agreement. Now, it takes work to do that. You have to also recognize differences in regions and different parts of the economy. I mean, that's really how you govern anyway. You're supposed to bring people together, develop something that works for all parts of the country. So the chairman was the ranking Republican when I was the chair. We have a great friendship and respect for each other, and it's our intention to get a strong bipartisan bill.
I want to talk to you about two other issues that you may not be directly involved in, but they certainly directly impact every elected member of any legislative body. One of them hits very close to you, and that's the situation at MSU. And all of the trauma that has been experienced, now the settlements that have been reached, without going into specifics of that, which have been dealt with pretty extensively. Is there a role in the federal government in oversight beyond Title IX to say, look, we have to take these students who, as I described to the Secretary of Secretary of Education recently, we don't think of them as little kids anymore living at home, but they're still young people who are still kind of finding their way in the world and don't necessarily know how to deal with that authority figure, and that puts them in a vulnerable position, particularly if they're out of home for the first time, living on a college campus, going for a higher education for their career, and pressures are on them. Is there a better way, and does the federal government have a role in protecting them?
The federal government does have a role, and let me just say, as an MSU grad and also as a mom, this whole situation just broke my heart to hear about it and to meet with the survivors and moms. They trusted Michigan State. They trusted the Olympic Committee. They trusted other adults who were telling them that this guy was somebody that they should trust as a physician. And it's horrible what happened. The federal government has a role in overseeing the U.S. Olympics and overseeing what should happen in terms of the broad rules for how they should operate, not accountability for universities, but also broadly in sports. I mean, and we have seen a situation where, frankly, there needs to be more oversight, particularly with girls' sports, and understand, just because it seems to have been treated differently. And they need to have some confidence that this kind of thing's not going to happen in the future, because it's horrible and it will affect them the rest of their lives. They're so heroic. They're trying to move forward. They're trying to be positive. But this is a huge thing that will always be there with them.
Also school related, we have been reminded twice in recent months about the violence that can be perpetrated at our elementary schools, particularly close to home for anybody who has kids that are going to those schools, grandkids, or anybody who has any feeling about a society that has generally been open and free, and public schools have been safe places to be. Again, from a federal perspective, we all know it's abhorrent what's happening. From a federal perspective, what's the role and what's the path if you're going to try to intercede to do something?
Well, I think there are multiple things, and we as adults have to take responsibility. When my kids were in school, they were doing fire drills. I was doing fire drills when I was in school. Now my grandkids are doing active shooter drills. This is not okay. Again, as adults, we have a responsibility. I think it's about gun responsibility and safety, universal background checks. I think we need to make sure military style weapons are used by our military and not widely available for kids to get a hold of, to be able to go to school. It's also mental health. It's also supporting the safety of the buildings and having adults there that can certainly protect children. So it's a wide variety of things, but it is important that we are serious and we act. And when we talk about courage and tenacity, the young people today, all of them were born after Columbine, and they have every right to say, this is not okay. They need to be safe in their school, their teachers need to feel safe in the school, and it's our job, in a common sense way, to be doing things that keep them safe.
We've got 2.5 minutes left, and I am, after all, a political reporter, and this is a political year. Your re-election comes up in November. There are a couple of Republicans that are trying to challenge you. We'll find out which one will face you in November, Libertarians and third-party candidates. How do you approach this after the 2016 cycle, after the 2010 cycle, when we saw some big shifts? 2010 was a wave year for Republican. 2016 was as unsettled a political landscape as I have ever seen. And we come to 2018 and people ask me, what do you think is going to happen? And I can tell them with great confidence, I don't know. What do you see going into 2018?
Well, first of all, I do the same thing every day. I suit up and I go in to fight for Michigan every single day. And folks in Michigan, we're an independent lot, and we expect people to work hard and get things done. And so it's my job to earn their support and vote every single day, and that's what I do. I also think people expect us to work across the aisle, respect people, respect differences, listen to other people, and be able to react in a way that makes sure that they are understood and that people are fighting for them, and that's what I try to do.
Does the advent of Donald Trump, he's not on the ballot, but he's certainly going to be in this election. Does President Trump change the dynamic of the election, at least partially, even for someone who has done this before? But again, there is a new dynamic out there.
Well, there's no question that the president has changed communication with his tweets, and certainly is a major presence in many, many ways. I would say that for me, I, again, suit up for Michigan every single day. If our president does things that are good for us in Michigan, I will stand with him. If he does things that are bad for us, like taking away all the funding for the Great Lakes, then I will stand up to him and take him on. So to me, it's not about him. It's about his actions and what it means for us, for our families, for our communities, and for the state.
Senator Stabenow will face either Republican Sandy Pensler or John James in the general election. Those are the two Republicans running, as well as Libertarian candidates and third-party candidates. We'll continue to cover that race, and we've got more to the point. Before we go this morning, a rare non-political interview talking with Patti. She's the head of Consumers Energy, the largest energy company in the state. We talked to her about her goal of getting to renewables, and soon. What has it been like to come into this really big entity and take a look around? And you've clearly decided you're going to change at least part of the culture. We're going to get to a big part of that in a little bit, but what has it been like?
You know, the senior management team, when I became CEO, thought this is a good time to reevaluate and just confirm our purpose. We knew we were committed to Michigan, but we knew we wanted to just make sure that we had a purpose that would be resilient for our tenure as the leaders of the company. And we landed on CMS Energy, world-class performance, delivering hometown service. And let me just explain what we mean when we say that. Number one, we know we have to be good. We have to earn the right to serve the people of Michigan, and we don't take that lightly. But that service is then delivered by my team and my coworkers, and so we know we need to make sure they have the right skills, the capabilities, the right motivations and attitude to do a great job to deliver that world-class performance in a hometown way. We have the privilege of serving our friends, our families, our neighbors. We literally, when we show up on a job site, 9 times out of 10, we know somebody, either the customer or someone on the site or somebody else working on the site. We serve in our local communities. We have 43 service centers all across Michigan, and each of them is where my coworkers start their day and end their day, but they're out in our neighborhoods and in our community. And so we think that we can be world-class, but in a really hometown and personal way.
That is the kind of model, particularly that we're used to in West Michigan, seeing these kind of businesses perform like that. But you're trying to do that kind of performance. On the other hand, you're trying to do something that is a pretty remarkable lift, and that's get to renewables. And not just a few, but completely renewable. By when?
Yeah, we've made a commitment that we're going to eliminate coal as a fuel source by 2040. We've already reduced and retired more coal plants than any other investor-owned utility in the nation. We are leaders in this arena, and we've shown that you don't have to have a trade-off. It used to be that if you were going to convert from traditional fossil fuels to cleaner and more modular renewable sources, it might cost more, but that's not true anymore. And so we know that we don't have to make a trade-off, we can make a trade-up. We can have cleaner fuel sources and leaner fuel sources. So by 2040, we will have reduced our carbon emissions by 80%, which is a decade earlier than the Paris Climate Accord. And people ask us all the time, why are you doing that? Well, we're an energy company, and we can either have a negative impact, a neutral impact, or a positive impact on our environment. And we choose positive because we live here too.
Of course, while we were on Mackinac Island, we talked to a lot of people running for office. It's a big election cycle, and some of the attendees said that they were optimistic, though cautiously optimistic, about what this election could do for the state of Michigan. That's why we will be your local election headquarters and covering it from now through August and all the way to November. See you next week, 2 Point.